The password was Alina2547. I thought it was just random numbers and letters until I discovered it wasn't a password at all. It was a cry for help from a billionaire who had lost the most important person in his life. That password changed everything about my existence, transformed me from invisible to invaluable, and taught me that sometimes the most guarded secrets hide the deepest pain. Tell me about it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, because this story will show you how one moment of courage can rewrite your entire destiny. Now let me take you back to where it all began. 6 months ago, I was the most invisible person at Technova Industries. Miguel Santos, 28 years old, pushing a janitor's cart through Silicon Valley's most prestigious tech company every night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. While billionaires slept in their mansions, I mopped their marble floors and emptied their $1,000 wastebaskets. I wasn't supposed to be there. My parents, Carlos and Maria Santos, had sacrificed everything to bring our family from Guatemala when I was 12. They cleaned houses during the day so I could attend school, learn English, maybe become something more than they ever had the chance to be. But life had other plans. College lasted exactly 1 semester before the money ran out. My father's back gave out from years of construction work, and suddenly our family of 4 was surviving on my mother's housekeeping income and whatever I could earn. That's how I ended up at Technova, wearing navy blue coveralls with my name stitched above the pocket, carrying disinfectant and hope in equal measure. The irony wasn't lost on me. During high school, I'd been the kid who fixed everyone's computers, who understood technology like it was a second language. Teachers said I had potential, that I could be an engineer, maybe even start my own company. But potential doesn't pay rent or buy groceries. Every night, I walked through those gleaming corridors surrounded by the future. Holographic displays showed stock prices climbing into the stratosphere. Conference rooms held whiteboards covered in algorithms that could revolutionize industries. And there I was, spraying glass cleaner on surfaces that cost more than my family's annual income. The worst part wasn't the work itself, it was being invisible. Executives would have entire conversations 3 feet away from me as if I didn't exist. They'd discuss million-dollar deals while I wiped down their desks, never once acknowledging that another human being was in the room. I was furniture that moved. But I had a reason for enduring it all. Her name was Sofia Santos, my 16-year-old sister. She'd been born profoundly deaf, and watching her navigate a world that rarely accommodated her needs broke my heart daily. I'd learned American Sign Language when she was 5, becoming her interpreter, her advocate, her bridge to a hearing world that often treated her like she was broken instead of simply different. Sofia was brilliant. She could solve math problems that stumped her hearing classmates, created art that belonged in museums, and had dreams of becoming a graphic designer. But she needed a cochlear implant surgery that cost $80,000, money our family would never have. Insurance called it elective. I called it essential. So every night I pushed that cart through Technova's empty hallways, collecting trash and preserving dignity, saving every dollar I could. 2 jobs barely covered our basic expenses, but I was determined. Sofia deserved to hear her own laughter, to experience music, to have every opportunity I'd been denied. The building itself was a temple to innovation. 40 floors of glass and steel reaching toward the sky, with the CEO's office on the very top floor. Richard Blackwell's domain. I'd seen his picture in business magazines, silver-haired, sharp-suited, worth approximately $12 billion. He owned patents that powered half the world's smartphones, had revolutionized cloud computing, and apparently never slept, because his office lights were always on when I arrived at 10 p.m. I cleaned his floor every Tuesday and Friday night. Executive level required special clearance, additional background checks, and absolute discretion. The hallway leading to his office was lined with awards, magazine covers featuring his face, and photographs of him shaking hands with presidents and prime ministers. His office was larger than my family's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Silicon Valley's twinkling lights. The desk was carved from a single piece of Brazilian rosewood, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than I'd earn in 6 months. Everything was precise, perfect, intimidating. But I noticed things others missed. How he kept fresh flowers on his desk but never seemed to enjoy them. How he had 3 computers but only used one. How there was always a single coffee cup left behind, still warm, as if he'd just stepped away. Sometimes I wondered what it felt like to have that much power, that much responsibility, That much loneliness. Because that's what I sensed in that sterile perfection. Loneliness. Sophia was born on a snowy December morning when I was 12 years old. I remember holding her tiny hand in the hospital, watching her sleep peacefully in that plastic bassinet, completely unaware that silence would be her constant companion. The doctors delivered the news with clinical detachment, profound sensorineural hearing loss, bilateral, complete. My parents wept. I made a promise. From that day forward, I became Sophia's bridge to our world. When she was 5, I spent every afternoon after school learning American Sign Language from YouTube videos, practicing with online tutorials until my fingers moved like fluent dancers. My mother watched me signing with Sophia across our cramped kitchen table, tears streaming down her cheeks as she witnessed conversations she couldn't understand, but knew were filled with love. Sophia wasn't broken. She was extraordinary. By age 10, she could solve algebra problems that stumped high schoolers. Her artwork covered our refrigerator and bedroom walls, intricate drawings that captured emotions hearing people missed. She had dreams of becoming a graphic designer, creating visual stories for companies that would value her unique perspective. But our world wasn't built for Sophia. Teachers spoke without facing her, assuming she could read lips perfectly. Classmates treated her like she was intellectually disabled instead of just deaf. Store clerks grew impatient when she tried to communicate. Every day, I watched my brilliant sister diminish herself to fit into spaces that refused to accommodate her needs. The only thing that gave my life real meaning was knowing that somehow, someday, I would find a way to give Sophia the gift of hearing. Not because she needed fixing, but because she deserved choices. She deserved to experience Beethoven's symphonies, to hear her own laughter, to participate in conversations without relying on me as her interpreter. A cochlear implant could change everything. The surgery cost $80,000, a number that might as well have been $80 million for our family. Insurance companies called it elective, cosmetic, unnecessary. They didn't understand that for Sophia, hearing wasn't about convenience, it was about independence. I researched every grant program, every charity, every possible funding source. Most required documentation our undocumented parents couldn't provide. Others had waiting lists stretching years into the future. Meanwhile, Sophia was 17, approaching the age when language acquisition becomes significantly more difficult. We were running out of time. That's why I pushed that janitor's cart through Technova's corridors every night, collecting other people's discarded dreams while nurturing my own. My official salary was barely above minimum wage, but I picked up every available overtime shift, worked weekends, and took on additional buildings whenever possible. Every dollar went toward Sophia's fund, growing painfully slowly in a savings account that seemed to mock our efforts. During my breaks, I'd sit in Technova's empty cafeteria, surrounded by motivational posters about innovation and breakthrough thinking, calculating how many nights I'd need to work to afford Sophia's surgery. At our current pace, it would take approximately 4 years. Sophia would be 21 by then, potentially past the optimal window for the implant's effectiveness. The irony of my situation wasn't lost on me. Here I was, cleaning the offices of people who made millions overnight with the right algorithm, the right patent, the right connection. I'd grown up fixing computers for neighbors, understanding code like it was poetry, solving technical problems that baffled people twice my age. But without a college degree, without family connections, without the privilege of taking unpaid internships, my intelligence remained invisible. Sometimes during those quiet midnight hours, I'd find myself staring at the whiteboards in Technova's conference rooms. Equations that could revolutionize artificial intelligence. Diagrams for applications that would change how people communicated. Solutions to problems I understood intuitively, but would never be allowed to solve professionally. I'd taught myself 3 programming languages during high school, created websites for local businesses, even developed a simple app that helped deaf students navigate our school's website more effectively. But all of that meant nothing without the proper credentials, the right background, the social capital that opened doors in Silicon Valley. My parents didn't understand my frustration. To them, having any job was a blessing. They'd risked everything crossing borders so their children could have opportunities they'd never imagined. How could I explain that opportunities weren't enough when they remained perpetually out of reach? Sophia understood, though. She'd watch me practice sign language with increasing fluency. see me troubleshoot technology problems that stumped adults, and recognize the potential everyone else overlooked. "You're going to do something amazing someday," she'd signed to me across our dinner table. "I believe in you." Her faith kept me going through those endless nights at Technova, past the humiliation of being invisible, beyond the exhaustion of working 16-hour days. Because Sophia deserved more than just survival. She deserved to thrive in a world that would finally recognize her brilliance, and I was determined to make that happen, no matter what it cost me. It was a Tuesday, October 15th, at exactly 2:17 a.m. when everything changed forever. I remember the precise time because I'd just finished cleaning the 39th floor and was heading toward the elevator when I noticed something unusual. The lights in Richard Blackwell's office weren't just on, they were flickering. Not the steady glow I'd grown accustomed to during my 2 years of cleaning that floor, but an irregular pattern that seemed almost frantic. My first instinct was to stay where I was, finish my rounds quietly, and leave without disturbing whatever late-night work session was happening behind those imposing double doors. But something felt different that night. The usual hum of the building's air conditioning seemed louder. The shadows cast by the hallway's modern sculptures appeared more menacing. Even my janitor's cart seemed to squeak more loudly as I pushed it across the polished marble floor. I approached Richard Blackwell's office with the cautious steps of someone who understood their place in the world's hierarchy. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, I could see him sitting behind his massive Brazilian rosewood desk, but he wasn't working. He was staring at something in his hands, his shoulders shaking in a way that made my chest tighten with unexpected empathy. He was crying. Not the controlled, dignified tears of someone experiencing a business setback, but the raw, devastating sobs of a human being completely broken by grief. His silver hair was disheveled, his usually pristine suit jacket draped carelessly over his chair, his tie loosened around his neck. In his hands, he held what appeared to be a photograph, clutching it like it contained his entire universe. I'd seen powerful men vulnerable before, executives taking difficult phone calls, investors receiving bad news, but this was different. This was a billionaire stripped of every pretense, reduced to his most fundamental elements: pain, loss, and desperate longing. On his desk, I could see multiple computer screens displaying what looked like file folders labeled with names and dates. One folder, larger than the others, was labeled Alina in capital letters. It contained hundreds of subfolders, each with timestamps spanning several years. Photos, videos, documents, an entire digital archive dedicated to someone who clearly meant everything to him. That's when he noticed me. Richard Blackwell looked up from the photograph in his hands, his red-rimmed eyes meeting mine through the glass. For a moment, neither of us moved. I expected him to dismiss me, to demand privacy, to remind me of the invisible boundaries that separated people like him from people like me. Instead, he just stared, as if he was seeing me for the first time in 2 years. The photograph slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the floor beside his desk. My heart pounded against my ribs as I watched him make no effort to retrieve it. The image lay face up on the expensive Persian rug, and from where I stood, I could see it showed a young Latina woman with long dark hair and a bright smile. She was wearing what appeared to be a graduation cap and gown, and there was something else, a small device visible behind her ear that I recognized immediately. A hearing aid. My first instinct was to leave quietly, pretend I hadn't seen anything, maintain the professional invisibility that kept me employed. But something about the way he looked at that photograph, the way his entire body seemed to deflate with each passing second, stirred something deeper than self-preservation. Before I could second-guess myself, I knocked gently on his office door. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm sorry to disturb you, but I noticed you dropped something." He looked at me with confusion, as if trying to process how his janitor had suddenly developed the ability to speak. "What?" "Your photograph, sir. It fell." I gestured toward the image lying on his rug. "Would you like me to get it for you?" For several seconds, Richard Blackwell said nothing. He just studied my face with an intensity that made me wonder if he was trying to determine whether I could be trusted with whatever secret was contained in that simple family photo. Finally, he nodded. I entered his office for the first time in 2 years of cleaning it. The space felt even more imposing from the inside. The ceiling seemed higher, the windows more expansive, the silence more profound. I bent down and carefully picked up the photograph, taking a moment to really see the young woman captured in the image. She was beautiful, probably mid-20s, with intelligent eyes and a smile that radiated joy despite the obvious challenges she'd faced. The hearing aid was subtle but unmistakable, and something about her expression reminded me of Sophia, that particular blend of determination and vulnerability that comes from navigating a world not designed for people like you. I handed the photograph back to Richard Blackwell, and our fingers briefly touched. His hands were trembling. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Her name was Elena. Was past tense. My chest tightened as I processed the implications of that single word. "She's beautiful," I said softly. Because it was true, and because he seemed to need someone to acknowledge her existence. He looked at me sharply, surprised by my response. "You're not supposed to, you shouldn't have..." He stopped, seeming to realize the absurdity of his own words. That's when I noticed his computer screen more clearly. He'd been trying to open a video file labeled Last Letter Elena, MP4, but there was an error message displayed. Incorrect password. The cursor blinked in the password field, mocking his repeated failed attempts. Without thinking, I said, "Sometimes when people are upset, they forget passwords they use every day. Maybe step away for a moment, clear your head." He stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. Who are you?" "Miguel Santos, sir. I've been cleaning your office twice a week for 2 years. "Miguel." He repeated my name as if he was hearing it for the first time. "You've been here for 2 years?" I nodded, uncertain whether honesty would help or hurt me in this moment. That's when he asked the question that would change both our lives. "Do you know anything about sign language?" The question hung in the air between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was allowed to cross. Richard Blackwell, one of Silicon Valley's most powerful men, was asking his night janitor about sign language. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Yes, sir," I said quietly. "I'm fluent in American Sign Language." His eyes lit up with something I'd never seen before in our building's sterile corridors. Hope. "You are? How? Why?" I hesitated, knowing that sharing personal information could change the dynamic forever. But something about his raw vulnerability, the way he clutched Elena's photograph like it was the only thing keeping him anchored to this world, made me take the leap. My sister Sophia was born deaf. She's 16 now. I learned ASL when she was 5 so we could communicate properly. I gestured toward the photograph in his hands. "Elena, she uses hearing aids?" Richard nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Profound hearing loss since birth. Just like your sister." He looked at the picture again, tracing Elena's face with his finger. "She's brilliant, Miguel. Graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with a degree in computer science. She could code before she could properly write cursive letters." Could? I caught the past tense and felt my stomach tighten. "She's..." He struggled with the words. "We haven't spoken in 3 years. There was a disagreement. My family, my wife's family, they never understood Elena's potential. They saw her deafness as something to hide, to fix, to be ashamed of. When Elena started advocating for deaf rights, when she began using ASL in public instead of trying to pass as hearing, His voice broke. They said she was embarrassing the family name. The pieces began forming a picture I recognized too well. And you? I supported them." The words came out like a confession. "God help me. I thought they were right. I thought she needed to fit in, to appear normal for her own good. When she left, I told myself it was just teenage rebellion. I thought she'd come back when she matured, when she realized the world expects certain accommodations. I felt anger rise in my chest, but not at him, at the system that made brilliant people like Elena and Sophia feel like they needed to diminish themselves to be accepted." "What changed?" I asked. Richard gestured toward his computer screens. "Elena's been trying to contact me for months, but I only realized it recently. She's been sending coded messages through our company's security system. Not malicious attacks, intricate puzzles that only someone who knew me personally could create. She's been trying to tell me something." I stepped closer to his desk, looking at the folders labeled with Elena's name. "What kind of messages?" "That's just it. I can't decode them all. They're written in a combination of programming languages and what I think might be ASL abbreviations. I've hired the best cryptographers, but they can't crack the personal elements." He looked at me with desperate hope. "But someone who understands both deaf culture and technology might be able to help." My heart raced. This was so far outside my job description, so far beyond what someone like me was supposed to do. But looking at Richard Blackwell's tear-stained face, I saw my own parents when they first learned about Sophia's deafness. Lost, scared, desperate to connect with a child they didn't know how to reach. "Show me," I said. For the next hour, Richard walked me through Elena's digital breadcrumbs. File names that looked random but spelled out words in ASL fingerspelling. Code comments that contained emotional phrases deaf people use to express concepts hearing people often miss. Hidden messages embedded in seemingly routine system updates. She's not trying to hurt the company, I realized. She's trying to get your attention. These aren't attacks. They're love letters written in the only language she thinks you'll understand. Richard stared at me. Love letters? Look at this code structure. I pointed to one of the files. She's created a digital heart. Literally. The algorithm pulses like a heartbeat. And see these comment lines? Remember when Daddy taught me to code? She's reminding you of good memories. I taught her to program when she was 8, Richard whispered. She used to sit on my lap during weekend coding sessions. She learned faster than most of my engineers. She's still that little girl, Mr. Blackwell. She's just learned to protect herself because the world taught her that being deaf meant being less than. That's when Johnson, the night security supervisor, appeared in the doorway. His suspicious eyes moved between Richard and me, clearly uncomfortable with what he was witnessing. Mr. Blackwell, is everything all right? I noticed the janitor has been in your office for quite some time. The moment of connection shattered. I saw Richard's walls go back up, remembering who he was supposed to be, who I was supposed to be, and the invisible boundaries that separated our worlds. Everything's fine, Johnson, Richard said formally. Miguel was just reporting a technical issue he noticed. Johnson's skeptical glare made it clear he didn't believe that explanation, but he nodded. Sir, I should remind you that custodial staff aren't authorized for extended interactions with executives. Company policy. Of course. Richard's voice had returned to its professional monotone. Miguel, thank you for bringing this to my attention. You can finish your duties now. The dismissal stung, but I understood. Whatever moment of human connection we'd shared was over. I was back to being invisible, and he was back to being untouchable. But as I gathered my cleaning supplies, Richard said quietly, Miguel, would it be possible for you to return tomorrow night? There might be more technical issues that require your unique perspective. I met his eyes and saw the real question there. He was asking if I'd help him find his daughter. Yes, sir, I said. I'll be here. As I left his office, I caught Johnson staring at me with undisguised hostility. Something told me this conversation wouldn't remain private for long. I was probably about to be fired. Johnson wasted no time reporting our conversation to Human Resources. The next morning, while I was sleeping after my shift, my phone rang with a call that changed everything, but not in the way I'd hoped. Miguel Santos, this is Patricia Coleman from Technova Human Resources. We need you to come in today at 2 p.m. for a disciplinary meeting regarding your conduct last night. My stomach dropped. What kind of conduct? Unauthorized interaction with executive personnel, violation of security protocols, and potential breach of confidentiality agreements. Please bring your employee handbook and be prepared to discuss your future with the company. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in my family's cramped kitchen. Sophia looked up from her breakfast, immediately reading the distress on my face. What's wrong? She signed. I couldn't tell her. How could I explain that trying to help a grieving father might cost me the job that was supposed to fund her surgery? That my moment of humanity might have just destroyed our only hope? Nothing, just work stuff, I signed back, forcing a smile that fooled no one. My mother, Maria, studied my face with the intuition only mothers possess. Miguel, you look sick. What happened? I might lose my job today. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. My father, Carlos, looked up from his newspaper, his weathered hands gripping the pages tighter. Since his back injury, I'd become our family's primary breadwinner. Losing this job meant losing everything. Our apartment, Sophia's medical fund, our carefully constructed stability. At 2 p.m. sharp, I sat in Technova's sterile HR conference room across from Patricia Coleman, a woman whose expression suggested she'd rather be anywhere else. Johnson sat beside her, looking satisfied with the chaos he'd unleashed. Miguel, Patricia began, opening a thick file. You've been a reliable employee for 2 years. Clean record, punctual, no complaints, which makes last night's behavior particularly concerning. I was just doing my job, ma'am. Your job description doesn't include extended conversations with the CEO about personal matters, Johnson interjected. Company policy strictly prohibits unauthorized interactions between custodial staff and executives. Patricia nodded. Johnson reported that you spent over an hour in Mr. Blackwell's office discussing what appeared to be sensitive information. Can you explain this? I chose my words carefully. Mr. Blackwell seemed distressed. I offered basic assistance and left when he dismissed me. Basic assistance for over an hour? Johnson's tone was skeptical. What kind of assistance requires a janitor to examine the CEO's computer files? My heart pounded. How much had Johnson actually seen? How much did he understand? I noticed he was having technical difficulties and offered to help. I have some experience with computers. Patricia made notes in my file. Miguel, I need to be direct. Mr. Blackwell's office contains highly confidential information, company secrets, financial data, strategic plans worth billions of dollars. Any unauthorized access to this information constitutes grounds for immediate termination and potential legal action. The room felt like it was closing in around me. I didn't access anything unauthorized. I was just trying to help. Help with what specifically? Johnson pressed. What technical difficulties did Mr. Blackwell have that required your expertise? I couldn't answer without revealing Elena's story, without betraying Richard's trust. But my silence was damning me. That's when everything got worse. During our meeting, I'd been running Elena's digital messages through my mind, trying to understand their full meaning. Suddenly, a pattern emerged that made my blood run cold. The timestamps on her coded messages, the system vulnerabilities she'd been exploiting, the specific files she'd been targeting, they weren't random. Elena wasn't just trying to communicate with her father. She was working for Technova's biggest competitor, Cyberdyne Solutions. Her love letters were actually sophisticated reconnaissance missions, mapping Technova's security infrastructure from the inside. But here's what terrified me. I didn't think she was doing it maliciously. I think she was trying to prove her worth, to show her father that she was brilliant enough to be taken seriously. Miguel? Patricia's voice cut through my realization. You seem distracted. This is a serious conversation about your employment. I'm sorry. I was just thinking about what you said. Johnson leaned forward. Maybe he's thinking about what else he saw in that office. What other information he might have accessed. The accusation stung because it was partially true. I had seen sensitive information, but not in the way they imagined. I'd seen a father's desperate love for his daughter, hidden behind passwords and encrypted files. I need to ask you directly, Patricia said. Did you or did you not examine confidential files on Mr. Blackwell's computer? Before I could answer, the conference room door opened. Richard Blackwell himself walked in, his presence immediately changing the room's energy. Patricia and Johnson stood up quickly, clearly surprised by the CEO's unexpected appearance. Mr. Blackwell, Patricia stammered, we weren't expecting you. We're conducting a disciplinary review of one of our custodial employees. Richard's eyes met mine across the table. For a moment, I couldn't read his expression. Then he spoke words that would either save or destroy me. Miguel Santos is here because I requested his assistance with a personal matter. Any interaction you're investigating was at my direct request. The room fell silent. Johnson's face reddened with confusion and anger. Sir, with respect, company policy clearly states, Patricia began. Company policy serves the company's best interests, Richard interrupted. Miguel has unique qualifications that proved valuable to me last night. His assistance was both authorized and appreciated. I felt a surge of relief followed immediately by confusion. Why was Richard protecting me? And more importantly, did he know what I discovered about Elena's real activities? Johnson wasn't ready to give up. Mr. Blackwell, I observed this employee accessing your computer files for an extended period. Surely that constitutes exactly what I've described. Miguel, thank you for your discretion regarding our conversation. You may return to your regular duties. As I stood to leave, Richard added, in fact, I'd like to discuss a potential change in your job responsibilities. Patricia, please arrange for Miguel to have temporary security clearance for the executive floor. There may be additional technical issues requiring his expertise. I walked out of that conference room with my job intact, but I knew the real complications were just beginning. Because now I had to decide. Should I tell Richard what I'd discovered about Elena's activities, or try to protect a brilliant young woman who might be in over her head with corporate espionage? Either choice could destroy everything I was trying to build. That's when my world changed forever. That night, back in Richard's office, I couldn't hold back the truth any longer. The weight of what I'd discovered about Elena was crushing me, but I knew that protecting her required honesty, not silence. Mr. Blackwell, I began carefully, I need to tell you something about Elena's messages. They're not just love letters. Richard looked up from his computer, where we'd been decoding another layer of Elena's intricate communications. What do you mean? I took a deep breath. She's been working for Cyberdyne Solutions. The security probes, the system mapping, the data she's been accessing, it's corporate reconnaissance. But I don't think she's doing it to hurt Technova. The color drained from Richard's face. She's been stealing our secrets? No, sir. I think she's been trying to prove herself worthy of your attention. Look at the pattern. I pulled up her file access logs on his screen. She's only targeting non-critical systems, and every breach includes a signature that leads back to her. She wants to be caught. By you specifically. Richard stared at the data for several minutes, processing the implications. You're saying she's committing corporate espionage as a form of communication? I'm saying she's a brilliant young woman who learned from her father that the only language you respect is technological achievement. She's demonstrating her capabilities the only way she knows how. But working for our competitor, Richard's voice trailed off. Sir, I've been thinking about this all day. Elena graduated from Stanford with a computer science degree 3 years ago. Did any technology companies reach out to her for employment? Richard's silence was telling. Did you offer her a position at Technova? Did anyone in your network give her opportunities? She never asked, Richard said quietly. After our argument, she cut off all contact. I assumed she'd find her own path. Maybe she tried. Maybe every door was closed because people in your industry knew she was Richard Blackwell's deaf daughter, who'd been disowned. Maybe Cyberdyne was the only company willing to hire her, not because they valued her skills, but because they knew she had access to information about Technova. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. You think they're using her? I think she's trapped between wanting to prove herself professionally and desperately wanting to reconnect with her father. Cyberdyne probably promised her recognition, advancement, maybe even told her that outdoing Technova's security would demonstrate her worth to the industry. Richard buried his face in his hands. I destroyed her career before it even started. No, sir. You have a chance to fix this. I pulled up another screen. Look at the metadata from her recent messages. The IP addresses aren't coming from Cyberdyne's corporate offices. They're originating from a small cafe in Palo Alto called Silent Coffee. Silent Coffee? It's a cafe specifically designed for the deaf community. Free Wi-Fi, visual ordering systems, ASL fluent staff. Elena's been working there, probably as a freelancer, using their internet connection for her reconnaissance work. Richard leaned forward, studying the location data. She's 20 minutes away. She's been 20 minutes away this entire time, sir. Working in a place where she feels accepted, building a community with people who understand her, all while trying to get your attention through the only medium you've ever shared with her, code. I pulled up one final file, one I'd been saving for this moment. Mr. Blackwell, look at this. On his screen, I displayed Elena's most recent message, one that had arrived just hours earlier. Unlike her previous communications, this one wasn't embedded in system logs or hidden in security protocols. It was a simple text file placed directly on his desktop, visible to anyone who looked. The file was named DaddyIMissYou.txt. Richard opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single line of code, elegant, beautiful, and heartbreaking in its simplicity. It was a program that generated an infinite loop displaying one message. I'm sorry. Please come find me. She's not hiding anymore, I said softly. She's ready to stop running. Richard stared at the screen for a long moment, tears streaming down his face. Miguel, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. Of course, sir. Do you think she'll want to see me? After everything I put her through, after the years of silence, after letting my family convince me she was an embarrassment, I thought about Sophia, about the nights she'd cried because teachers treated her differently, about the way her face lit up whenever someone made the effort to communicate with her in ASL, about her dreams of being valued for her mind rather than pitied for her deafness. Mr. Blackwell, your daughter hasn't been trying to steal your secrets. She's been trying to steal back your love. The only question is whether you're ready to give it to her. Richard stood up, straightening his tie with new determination. Miguel, I have an offer for you. Sir? I want to hire you for my cybersecurity team. Your understanding of Elena's methods, your ability to think like someone from the deaf community, your technical skills. Technova needs that perspective. But more than that, I need someone I can trust to help me rebuild the relationship I destroyed. I stared at him, hardly able to process what he was saying. You're offering me a job in cybersecurity? I'm offering you a career, full salary, benefits, tuition assistance if you want to finish your degree. And the first project would be developing accessibility protocols for our entire digital infrastructure, making Technova a place where people like Elena and Sophia can thrive. My heart pounded. What about Elena? What about Cyberdyne? Elena's messages aren't corporate espionage, Miguel. They're a daughter's cry for help, and I'm going to answer that cry. He paused. But I'm going to need someone who understands both technology and the deaf community to help me do it right. I thought about Sophia, about her surgery fund, about the dreams I'd given up. And the payment? For Sophia's surgery? Richard looked at me with something approaching respect. Miguel, the signing bonus alone will cover your sister's surgery. This isn't charity, this is business. Technova needs what you can offer. For the first time in years, I felt hope replace desperation. When do we start? Tonight. We're going to Silent Coffee to bring my daughter home. Over the next few months, everything changed, but not in the way I'd imagined. Silent Coffee was nothing like Technova's sterile corporate environment. The moment Richard and I walked through the door, we entered a world where communication flowed through hands instead of voices, where visual cues replaced audio announcements, and where Elena had found the community that had always been denied to her. She was sitting in the corner, exactly where I'd expected to find her, surrounded by 3 laptops and wearing noise-canceling headphones that served no practical purpose for someone who couldn't hear. Her long, dark hair fell across her face as she typed with the fluid precision of someone whose fingers spoke multiple languages: ASL, Python, JavaScript, and what I was beginning to recognize as pure genius. When she looked up and saw her father, the laptop screens reflected in her eyes like tiny mirrors of the digital world where she'd been trying to reach him for 3 years. Richard froze. All his corporate confidence, his commanding presence, his ability to command rooms full of investors, none of it mattered here. He was just a father who'd lost his daughter and had no idea how to get her back. Elena, he said, his voice breaking on her name. She stared at him for several seconds, then slowly removed her headphones. Her hands moved in rapid ASL, too fast for Richard to follow, but I understood every word. Why are you here? Why now? Richard looked at me helplessly. I stepped forward, signing as I spoke to include both of them in the conversation. Elena, your father received your messages, all of them. He knows about the code, about Cyberdyne, about everything you've been trying to tell him. Her expression shifted between hope and skepticism. You brought a translator? She signed. Even now you can't communicate with me directly? I've been learning, Richard said, his clumsy ASL making him stumble over the simple phrase. I'm sorry it took so long. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her hands remained steady. 3 years too long. The conversation that followed wasn't the immediate reconciliation I'd hoped for. Elena had built walls around her heart, and Richard's apologies, however sincere, weren't enough to tear them down instantly. But over the following weeks, something remarkable began to happen. Richard started coming to Silent Coffee every Tuesday and Thursday evening, not as the CEO of Technova, but as Elena's father. He hired an ASL tutor and practiced signing for hours. He learned about deaf culture, about the community Elena had found, about the ways he'd failed her without even realizing it. Meanwhile, I transitioned into my new role at Technova. My official title was Director of Accessibility Technology, but my real job was building bridges between hearing and deaf employees, between traditional corporate culture and inclusive innovation, between Richard and Elena. The work wasn't easy. Technova's executive team initially resisted the accessibility initiatives. They saw them as expensive accommodations rather than competitive advantages. When I proposed hiring deaf programmers, several VPs questioned whether it would hurt productivity. "Miguel," Richard said during one particularly tense board meeting, "explain to them what you explained to me about deaf perspective in cybersecurity." I stood up, facing 15 executives who'd never seen me as anything more than the former janitor. Deaf programmers think differently about digital communication. They're naturally more visual, more attuned to patterns that hearing programmers miss. Elena spotted vulnerabilities in our system that your best engineers had overlooked for months. "But the communication barriers," one VP began, "are only barriers if you refuse to adapt," I interrupted. "Elena can code circles around most of your current team. The question isn't whether she can do the job, it's whether you're capable of recognizing talent when it doesn't fit your preconceptions." That meeting changed everything. Within a month, we'd hired 3 deaf programmers, implemented visual alert systems throughout the building, and launched Technova's first accessibility-focused product line. Elena remained hesitant about joining Technova directly, but she agreed to consult on our accessibility projects. Watching her work was like watching poetry written in code. She created applications that transformed how deaf users interacted with technology, developed visual interfaces that were more intuitive than traditional audio-based systems, and designed security protocols that were virtually impenetrable. But the real breakthrough came when Elena proposed something radical, an AI assistant specifically designed for deaf users, one that could translate speech to sign language in real time and vice versa. It would eliminate the need for interpreters in most business situations, she explained during a presentation to Richard and me. Deaf professionals could participate in conference calls, meetings, and negotiations without depending on others to facilitate communication. Richard leaned forward. "How long would something like that take to develop? With the right team and resources? 2 years. But it would revolutionize accessibility technology and position Technova as the industry leader in inclusive innovation." I watched Richard's face as he processed Elena's proposal. This was his daughter, brilliant, innovative, capable of transforming entire industries, and he was finally seeing her potential without the filter of his own prejudices. "Elena," he said, switching to ASL with improving fluency, "would you consider leading this project?" For the first time since I'd known her, Elena smiled at her father. Not the professional smile of someone tolerating a difficult conversation, but the genuine joy of a daughter who'd finally been recognized for who she truly was. "Yes, Daddy, I would." The obstacles we faced over the following months were significant. Integrating deaf employees into a predominantly hearing workplace required cultural changes that some people resisted. Elena and Richard's relationship required patience and continuous effort to rebuild. My own transition from janitor to executive faced skepticism from colleagues who couldn't accept that intelligence existed outside traditional credentials. But for the first time in my life, I was using my abilities to their full potential. Sophia's surgery was scheduled. Elena was leading the most innovative project in Technova's history, and Richard was learning that his daughter's deafness wasn't a limitation. It was a superpower he'd been too blind to see. The password hadn't been Elena2547 after all. It was much simpler than that. It was love, acceptance, and the recognition that sometimes the most valuable perspectives come from the places we least expect to find them. 6 months later, I stood in the same building where I'd once pushed a janitor's cart, but now I occupied the corner office on the 38th floor with a nameplate that read, Miguel Santos, Chief Technology Officer of Accessibility Innovation. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. Sophia's cochlear implant surgery had been a complete success. Watching her hear her own voice for the first time, seeing her face light up when she finally experienced the music she'd only felt through vibrations, was a moment that justified every risk I'd taken. But what made it even more meaningful was that she chose to remain fluent in ASL, embracing both worlds instead of abandoning the deaf community that had shaped her identity. Elena's AI translation system had launched 3 months earlier and was already revolutionizing how businesses communicated with deaf clients and employees. The technology could translate spoken English into real-time ASL video and vice versa, eliminating the need for human interpreters in most professional situations. Major corporations were licensing the software, and Elena had been featured on the cover of Tech Innovator magazine as the deaf developer who changed everything. But the real victory wasn't the technology itself. It was watching Elena and Richard rebuild their relationship. Every Tuesday evening, they still met at Silent Coffee, but now their conversations flowed in a mixture of spoken English and ASL. Richard had become fluent enough to sign complex technical discussions, and Elena had found her voice in both languages. The password Elena2547 finally made sense. It wasn't just her name and birth date. It was April 25, 2024, exactly 7 years after their last real conversation. The day Richard had chosen career over family, conformity over acceptance. The day he'd lost his daughter by trying to make her fit into a world that wasn't ready for her brilliance. Technova had become the industry leader in accessibility technology, not as a charitable gesture, but as a competitive advantage. Our deaf employees brought perspectives that hearing developers missed. They understood user experiences that mainstream technology companies ignored. They created solutions for problems that most people didn't even know existed. The financial impact was staggering. Technova's accessibility division generated over $200 million in revenue during its first year. Elena's translation software was being integrated into hospitals, schools, courtrooms, and corporate boardrooms across the country. What started as a father's desperate attempt to reconnect with his daughter had become a billion-dollar market opportunity. I'd received the Innovator of the Year award from the Silicon Valley Technology Council, recognizing Technova's leadership in inclusive design. But standing at that podium, looking out at an audience that included venture capitalists who'd never given me a second glance when I was cleaning their offices, I realized the real award was much simpler. Respect. Richard Blackwell had become more than my employer. He'd become a mentor and friend. But more importantly, he'd become the father Elena had always needed. Their relationship wasn't perfect. Years of hurt couldn't be erased overnight. But they were building something new, something stronger, something based on mutual respect rather than familial obligation. "Miguel," Elena said during one of our project meetings, switching seamlessly between speech and sign as had become our custom. "I want to show you something." She pulled up a video message on her laptop. It was from a 12-year-old deaf girl named Amanda, whose parents had used our translation software to communicate with her teachers for the first time. The girl was signing excitedly about finally feeling included in her classroom, about her hearing classmates learning basic ASL to talk with her, about dreams of becoming a programmer like Elena. "This is why we do the work," Elena continued. "Not for the money or the recognition, but for kids like Amanda who deserve to see people like us in positions of leadership." That night, as I walked through Technova's corridors, the same hallways I'd mopped for 2 years, I reflected on the journey that had brought us all here. Sometimes the most important passwords aren't the ones that unlock computers. They're the ones that unlock hearts, minds, and possibilities we never imagined. Richard had learned that his daughter's deafness wasn't a limitation to overcome, but a strength to celebrate. Elena had discovered that her father's love had never disappeared. It had just been buried under years of miscommunication and societal pressure. And I had learned that intelligence and worth aren't measured by degrees or background, but by what we do with the opportunities we create for ourselves and others. The invisible janitor had become visible not by changing who he was, but by finding a place where who he was mattered, where sign language was as valuable as spoken English, where solving problems was more important than having the right pedigree, where helping people connect was the most valuable skill of all. Sophia started her freshman year at Stanford last month, majoring in biomedical engineering with a focus on assistive technology. She's part of a new generation that will grow up seeing deafness not as a disability, but as a different way of experiencing and improving the world. As for that password, Elena2547, it's been changed to something much simpler now, Family 2024. Because that's what we all found in the end. A family built not on blood or obligation, but on understanding, acceptance, and the recognition that our differences make us stronger together. If this story moved you, or if you know someone who could benefit from seeing that barriers are meant to be broken, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about finding hope in unexpected places. And let me know in the comments, what password would unlock the most important door in your life?